What if the story of humanity's survival didn't begin with language, fire, or farming, but with something far simpler? A shard of stone, a sharpened bone, a weapon so primitive yet so clever that it changed the destiny of our species forever. Picture this: 300,000 years ago, the world was not ours. We were just another vulnerable creature in a wilderness teeming with predators. Saber-toothed cats lurked in the tall grass. Giant hyenas stalked the night. Even the wind carried the scent of danger. In this world, the difference between life and death often came down to a single object gripped tightly in a human hand. But where did these first tools come from? Were they an accidental discovery, born from a single, desperate moment, or the product of a long, silent revolution in the human mind? And if so, what else might our ancestors have known that we've never been told? This is the story you won't find in dusty textbooks. A tale hidden in fragments of flint, buried bones, and faint cave paintings. Clues scattered across time, whispering a truth far older than recorded history. Tonight, we journey back to the moment we stopped being prey and started becoming predators. We'll uncover how Homo sapiens not only survived but thrived, through cunning, creativity, and weapons so deceptively simple they still influence us today. So, are you ready to learn the secret history behind the first human-made tools, the weapons that built our world, and the survival instincts still etched into our DNA? Let's begin. The stone that cut the future. What could a single piece of sharpened stone possibly have to do with the rise of Homo sapiens? More than you might imagine. Long before swords and spears, before bows and arrows, the first toolmakers chipped away at riverbed rocks, creating razor-sharp edges. To us, they may look like nothing more than broken pebbles. But to our ancestors, these early stone tools were the first taste of control over nature itself. With them, they could slice meat from bone, scrape hides for clothing, and shape wood into shelters. They could survive where bare hands alone would fail. But here's the part we often overlook. Making these tools wasn't instinct. It was learned. Every strike of stone against stone was a calculated decision. The knowledge had to be taught, shared, and passed down. In that sense, each tool carried not just a function, but a story. Imagine a child watching an elder skillfully chip a flint core, the air filled with the rhythmic sound of stone on stone. Every flake that fell was a lesson: how to strike at the right angle, how to avoid shattering the core, how to sharpen without breaking. This was the earliest form of education, a whisper of the culture that would one day dominate the planet. And here's the twist. The tools weren't just for hunting. Evidence from archaeological sites suggests they were used for everything from crafting wooden spears to processing plants, meaning they allowed Homo sapiens to diversify their diet and adapt to new environments. This adaptability, this willingness to innovate, is what separated us from other species. The first chipped stone was more than a blade. It was a promise that humans would not just endure the challenges of the wild, they would master them. Spears in the shadows. If the sharpened stone gave us the ability to survive, the spear gave us the power to take life from a distance. Why is this such a big deal? Because before the spear, every hunt was a gamble with death. To kill a large animal, you had to get close, too close. And in that moment, the hunter could become the hunted. Somewhere around 400,000 years ago, early humans began lashing sharpened stone tips to long wooden shafts. The spear wasn't just an extension of the arm, it was an extension of human will. It meant that we could deliver a lethal strike without entering the danger zone. It meant we could choose when and how to engage. Think about the first hunters venturing into the grasslands at dawn, spears in hand. The air is cool, the earth damp with morning dew. They move in silence, eyes scanning for movement. In the distance, a herd of antelope grazes. With a coordinated rush, they hurl their spears, the weapons slicing through the air with a deadly whistle. One animal falls, and for the first time, the tribe feasts not on scraps left behind by predators, but on their own kill. The spear also changed something more subtle but just as important: it required teamwork. A single hunter with a spear was dangerous. A group of hunters, coordinating their throws, could bring down animals many times their size. This demanded communication, trust, and planning skills that would ripple outward, shaping the very structure of human society. The The spear was more than a weapon. It was a declaration that humans no longer accepted the role of prey. Fire, the weapon that couldn't be thrown. We often think of fire as warmth, as comfort, but in the beginning, fire was the most terrifying thing early humans had ever encountered. Lightning strikes. A tree bursts into flames. The heat is unbearable. The air is filled with smoke, the crackle of burning wood, and the roar of flames. Most animals run, but a few curious humans stay. What made them different? Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was curiosity. But somewhere, someone realized that this raging force could be contained, tamed, and even used as a weapon. Fire wasn't just for cooking, though that alone was revolutionary. It made food safer, easier to chew, and more nutritious. Fire extended the day, allowing humans to work, talk, and plan after sunset. And, perhaps most importantly, fire was a shield. It kept predators at bay, lit the darkness, and gave humans a psychological edge over the wild. But it was also a weapon unlike any other. One that could drive herds into traps, flush animals from hiding, and even turn an enemy's shelter into ash. The controlled use of fire demanded a new kind of intelligence. Not just how to start it, but how to keep it alive, transport it, and protect it. It also demanded something else: social organization. A fire left unattended could burn out, leaving the group vulnerable. So someone had to guard it, feed it, keep it breathing. Around those flickering flames, stories were told, plans were made, and alliances were forged. In a way, fire was the first weapon that reshaped not just how humans hunted, but how humans lived together. The first traps, outsmarting the hunt. What if survival didn't always come down to strength or speed, but to patience? Some of the earliest victories of Homo sapiens weren't won in direct combat. They were set in motion hours or even days before the prey ever arrived. We're talking about the first traps. Imagine a time when a single injury could mean death, when chasing an animal into exhaustion risked your own. Traps changed the equation entirely. Instead of risking life and limb in a head-to-head chase, our ancestors began to shape the landscape to work for them. They dug pits, lined them with sharpened stakes, camouflaged them with leaves. They used rock slides to drive animals toward narrow passages where hunters waited. Even simple snares made from twisted plant fibers could capture smaller game while the hunters focused on bigger prey. The genius of traps was that they worked when you weren't there. While a hunting party gathered berries or sharpened spears, the forest might be quietly delivering dinner into a snare. This was not just a physical tool, it was a mental one. It showed that humans could think in terms of cause and effect over long periods of time. We didn't just react to the world, we set plans in motion. Trapping also changed relationships within early communities. Suddenly, hunting didn't always require the fastest runners or strongest warriors. It rewarded the clever, the observant, the ones who noticed the subtle trail an animal took every dawn. This shift meant that survival skills could come from all members of the tribe: men, women, the young, the old. In the quiet patience of the first traps, humanity took another step toward something greater than survival: strategy. The bowstrings whisper. If the spear let us kill from a few paces away, the bow let us strike from the shadows. The earliest evidence of bow and arrow use dates back tens of thousands of years. It's hard to overstate how radical this innovation was. The bow wasn't just a tool, it was an equalizer. It allowed a smaller, weaker hunter to bring down prey as effectively as the strongest warrior. Picture it. A lone hunter crouched in the tall grass. His prey grazes on the far edge of a clearing, far beyond the reach of a spear. He draws the bowstring slowly, the wood bending under the strain. There's a moment of perfect silence. The only sound is his own breath. Then, the soft snap of the string, the whisper of an arrow slicing the air, and the world changes. The bow made stealth a lethal advantage. You didn't have to run the prey down or risk a counterattack. You could choose your moment, pick your target, and strike with precision. And unlike spears, arrows could be recovered, reused, or tipped with poisons for added lethality. This was also one of the first weapons that demanded a deep understanding of materials. Hunters had to choose the right wood for flexibility, the right fibers for the bowstring, the right feathers for arrow fletching. They had to understand tension, aerodynamics, and durability, concepts we might call engineering today, but back then were learned entirely through trial, error, and shared knowledge. The bow also changed warfare. Suddenly, distance could decide victory. Tribes could defend territory from afar, hunt in silence, and kill without warning. It made humans more than hunters, it made us tacticians. And in the twang of every bowstring, there was a promise. The prey would never see us coming. The edge of metal. For hundreds of thousands of years, stone was king. Then humanity discovered something buried deep beneath the earth, and everything changed. At first, metal was rare, almost magical. A strange, heavy material found in certain rocks, transformed by fire into something sharper, stronger, and more durable than any stone blade. The first metals humans worked were copper and gold, soft, easy to shape, but not ideal for weapons. But when we discovered bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, the game changed forever. The first bronze blades were more than tools. They were symbols. A bronze spear tip gleamed in the sunlight, a weapon both beautiful and deadly. Its edge stayed sharp longer than flint, and it could pierce hides and armor that stone weapons could not. Metal also shifted the balance of power. The tribes or villages with access to metalworking gained a decisive advantage over those without. Wars could be won before they were fought, simply by having the sharper sword or the stronger spear. Control of metal sources became as important as hunting grounds or fresh water. But perhaps the most profound change was psychological. A stone blade felt temporary, it could chip, break, wear down. A metal blade felt eternal, could be repaired, reforged, passed down through generations. It became part of the identity of the person who wielded it, a link between ancestors and descendants. Metal wasn't just an improvement, it was a revolution. And with it, humanity stepped firmly onto the path that would lead to cities, kingdoms, and empires. The armor of the mind. What if the most important weapon we ever created wasn't made of stone, wood, or metal at all? Long before chainmail and shields, Homo sapiens learned to protect themselves with something invisible: strategy. This was the armor of the mind. Every predator in the wild has teeth, claws, or speed, but humans? We had none of those in abundance. What we had was the ability to think several steps ahead. We could observe the patterns of prey, anticipate the movements of enemies, and adapt on the fly when plans went wrong. Consider a hunt for mammoth. It wasn't just a matter of charging in with weapons raised. Hunters studied the herd's movements for days, even weeks. They mapped the terrain in their minds, identified choke points, and set ambushes. They knew where the wind would carry their scent, and they positioned themselves accordingly. This wasn't instinct, it was deliberate planning passed down like a family recipe. And when humans began to fight each other for resources, the same mental armor applied. Leaders rose not just for their strength, but for their ability to outthink rivals. Battles could be won without a single blow, simply by making the enemy believe they'd already lost. Fear, misdirection, false retreats, these were the first psychological weapons. The armor of the mind was something no predator could take from us, no resource could run dry. Once we forged it, it was ours forever. And every innovation that followed, every spear, trap, or bow was amplified by the mind behind it. Poison and the power of the invisible. Not every weapon is meant to strike in plain sight. Somewhere along the line, our ancestors learned that the deadliest attacks didn't always come from the sharpest blades, but from the smallest doses. Plant sap, snake venom, crushed seeds, and fungi that could kill in silence. The use of poison was a turning point in human warfare and hunting. It meant that even a slight wound could be fatal to prey or to an enemy. Arrows tipped with poison could bring down an animal far larger than the hunter. Water sources could be tainted to drive rival groups away. And because the effects of poison weren't immediate, victims often didn't realize they'd been attacked until it was too late. But poison also demanded knowledge. You had to know which plants were deadly, which were harmless, and which could heal. In that sense, poison and medicine grew side by side, both born from the same deep study of the natural world. Every hunter or healer who experimented took a risk, not all survived their discoveries. The power of poison was also psychological. Once rival tribes knew you could strike without being seen, trust became scarce. Every meal, every drink of water could bring doubt. This fear alone could make enemies surrender without a fight. Invisible weapons meant that Homo sapiens didn't need to be the fastest or strongest, just the most prepared. The walls we built. Eventually, humans realized something extraordinary. The best weapon wasn't always about killing the enemy, but stopping them from reaching you in the first place. The earliest walls weren't made for grand cities. They were simple barricades, stakes driven into the ground around sleeping areas, thorny branches woven into fences, mounds of dirt or stone piled high. These defenses kept predators out and children in. They turned campsites into safe zones. As human settlements grew, so did the walls. They became more than barriers. They became symbols of safety and strength. A wall said, "Here is where we live. Here is where we stand. If you want to take it, you'll pay in blood." Walls didn't just protect people. They protected resources. A stored cache of food, a herd of livestock, a water source. All could be defended more easily behind a barrier. And the higher the wall, the greater the advantage for the defenders, who could rain arrows or stones down on attackers from above. But walls also changed the way humans thought about territory. They drew clear lines between us and them. Inside the walls was home, outside was danger. That division shaped our social bonds, making the group within the wall a single unit with a shared fate. The moment we built the first walls, we began to imagine a world that could be ours alone, and we started defending it with everything we had. The weapons we can't see. What if the deadliest weapons humans ever created don't even exist in the physical world? By the time metal swords gleamed in the sun and arrows whistled through the air, Homo sapiens had already stumbled upon something even more potent: ideas. Words could rally a group to fight, unite a scattered people under one cause, or turn neighbors into enemies overnight. This wasn't just language, it was persuasion, deception, and storytelling used as tools for survival. Long before written history, campfire tales carried more than entertainment. They taught lessons about dangerous animals, mapped migration routes, and passed down knowledge of medicinal plants. But they could also spread warnings, stir fear, and convince others to act in ways that benefited the storyteller. When humans began organizing in larger groups, these invisible weapons took on new forms. Symbols painted on shields could terrify an opponent. Songs and chants could strengthen the courage of warriors before battle. Rumors could weaken an enemy without a single arrow fired. We discovered that control over the mind could be just as decisive as control over the body. The spear, the bow, the trap, they could kill an enemy. But a well-placed idea? That could destroy an enemy before the fight even began. These invisible weapons still dominate our world today. Propaganda, negotiation, alliances, and diplomacy. Our ancestors might have carried spears, but it was their mastery of the unseen battlefield that truly set Homo sapiens apart from every other creature on Earth. In the end, the mind remained our sharpest blade. Conclusion: from the first chipped stone to the first whispered lie, our survival was never about having the biggest claws or the strongest jaws. It was about the tools we made and the minds that made them. We began with nothing but bare hands and fear, and we turned them into spears, traps, bows, and blades. We learned to bend fire to our will, to shape metal from stone, to shield ourselves with walls, and to weave poison and strategy into our arsenal. We forged alliances, spread ideas, and built civilizations, all on the foundation of those first tools clutched by trembling hands in the deep past. The hidden history of Homo sapiens is not just the story of weapons. It's the story of transformation. Every innovation wasn't just about killing. It was about surviving, adapting, and eventually mastering our world. And here's the truth. Our greatest weapon has never been what we hold, but what we imagine. The next chapter in our story won't be written in stone or bronze. It will be written in the ideas we shape, the tools we invent, and the choices we make. The question is, what will we create next?